And good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sam Floor. I'm the Vice President of Programs with the League of Women Voters of the Richmond metro area. We're so pleased that you can be here and learn from the experts in education advocacy in the Central Virginia region. So I'm so thankful that we're joined tonight by Matthew Stanley, who's the Director of Advocacy for Richmond Public Schools, Ken Blackstone, the Assistant Director of Communications at Henrico Public Schools, and we should also be joined by Sean Smith, the Chief Communication Officer and Community Engagement Officer with Chesterfield Public Schools. So these guys have all the insights and knowledge as to what's going on in our local Central Virginia area, but also things that are applicable, I think, to school divisions and public educations across the Commonwealth. So if you're tuning in from other localities, I think tonight will still be really enlightening. So I'm gonna shut up and turn things over to Matthew, Ken, and Sean. And again, thank you so much for being here. Please, I encourage you all to make this an engaging evening. So use the chat function, the Q&A function, raise your hand. Please ask questions of Matthew, Ken, and Sean. I'll be sure to keep an eye on that chat as the evening progresses and make sure your questions are addressed by them as we go. But Matthew and Ken and Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Sam and Sean. I see you just joined us. We have you teed up first to do introductions if you want to get us started.
Thanks for having me. My name is Sean Smith. I'm the Chief Communications and Community Engagement Officer for Chesterfield Schools. I've been with the school division for a little over 16 years. Better part of my career has been with regards to government relations work, communications work. I oversee a significant amount of responsibilities, but one of them, obviously, for me being here tonight is overseeing the government relations piece for our school division, and happy to be part of this panel.
Thank you, Ken.
Hello, my name is Ken Blackstone, and I am the Assistant Director of Communications for Henrico County Public Schools. And I have been with Henrico County for about 2.5 years, although I've worked in K-12 communications for probably 30-ish or so years. In my role with Henrico County, I serve as our legislative liaison, our lobbyist during the legislative session. I also do a lot of legislative related things leading up to the session and right after the session. But I also have other kind of traditional communications duties as well. Before I came to Henrico County Public Schools, I worked with the State Department of Education, and I have also worked for Prince William County Public Schools, and also a couple different school divisions in South Carolina and in California. So that's a little bit about my background.
And good evening again, everyone. My name is Matthew Stanley. I am the Director of Advocacy and Outreach with Richmond Public Schools. I work within our engagement office, and I'm very proud to represent our school division in local and state government affairs and really supporting a robust state advocacy legislative program. We're down at the Capitol every single year, advocating for the best interest of our students and staff and families. And then I also oversee some of the community partnership work that Richmond Public Schools undertakes, working with nonprofits and other community organizations across the city to leverage partnerships and the wonderful things that are happening across the Richmond region that can support our kids. So very excited to be here tonight. We're really grateful to do a Richmond only I guess, little discussion last year, and really excited to expand our regional cooperation and collaboration with our counterparts in the counties to do this as a bit more of a regional activity this year. We also have the wonderful organization out there, Plan RVA, who has also been doing some work of coordinating some education policy advocacy across the localities in the region, and I'm excited for more collaboration and partnership there. But before we jump into our presentation tonight, we also wanted to take just a moment to recognize any of our school board members that are with us this evening. I know I can see at least 4 of them in the chat coming from the city of Richmond. We have our current school board member, Mrs. Cheryl Burke. Mrs. Burke, thank you so much for always being a robust supporter of our advocacy efforts. And I see some of our new school board members coming in to start their terms in January, Mr. Ali Farouk, Mr. Matt Percival, and Mr. Wesley Hedgepeth. So I wanted to thank you all for being here this evening. And Ken, Sean, please feel free if you want to do any further introductions. But I think after that, we started off with talking about JLARC. Sean.
Thank you, Matt. And I want to also say one of the nice things about the 3 of us being here is one of the great interactions we have is through our working government relations piece. And so when we're at the General Assembly or outside the General Assembly, it's the ability for our localities to collaborate. And so I think part of that, obviously, for what I want to talk about this evening really is regard to the JLARC study. If you're not familiar and if you need something to read late at night because it's really a large presence, take a look at the JLARC study. As we know, obviously, the General Assembly took some time over the last couple of years to look at the cost of education in Virginia and really look at sort of where their investments they're making. So got on that slide a couple of the key findings. The important note is obviously that a lot of our school divisions are receiving less funding than we should. I think inherently, the fun part about our relationship with the General Assembly is that we are sincerely appreciative of their support of our school divisions, but we also recognize that there are some funding needs. One of the challenges we actually have in Chesterfield schools is a lot of times people look at our school divisions, since that we're one of the largest school divisions, we're larger than Atlanta, larger than Boston, but we still have significant needs. And so we were appreciative that the study really recognizes the fact that there are needs across different school divisions, and that certainly that the formula they have right now doesn't adequately fund the needs for our school division. Quite frankly, you cannot run a school division based on just the funding you receive from the SOQs. You've got to have funding with regards to your locality, obviously the federal government as well. So as we look at certainly those findings, and I guess, Matt, if you don't mind clicking the next slide or whoever, if I can, let me know.
I got it.
Thank you. So some of the pragmatic examples in the JLARC study really talked about some different language in the Appropriation Act. So what I've listed here are some of the recommendations, certainly that our school divisions coalesced around. We know in our school division alone, JLARC estimates about $200 to $300 million in incremental funding is due to our school division. And you can anticipate, obviously, we know in our school division, certainly with additional funding, we're always more than happy to put that funding to good use, certainly at the classroom level. But that's quite significant. And our budget runs close to $1 billion, but that's a significant amount of funding. So one of the pieces that we have conversations with regards to our delegation, the General Assembly, is we also try to be realistic. We know $203 million is not going to come in one fell swoop. So some of the things that we've been advocated for is really with alignment to the support cap piece, which we know a lot about, really lifting, eliminating that support cap. Listed some other pieces there too over time, looking at the investments we're making, obviously with regard to our employees. One of the biggest pieces when we talk to the General Assembly about the investments they make with regards to school salaries is they do salary increases just for our teachers. Obviously, for our school division, that means the funding they're putting forward, first of all, doesn't cover the full salary increase, and it doesn't cover all of our employees. Quite frankly, it covers about half of our total employees. So that's a conversation that we have with the General Assembly. And if we can go to the next slide.
I think
that's construction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a quick highlight, obviously, with regards to the JLARC study. And as we work our way through this conversation, happy to answer any questions with regards to that study.
I think Charlene had her hand raised. Charlene, would you like to type your question into the chat? Let's see, I think I can unmute you. Can you unmute yourself, Charlene?
Yes.
You have a question?
No, I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, well, it must have been a glitch then. Never mind. Continue on, guys.
Okay, over to me, school construction now. I was going to drop one additional link in the chat. Sean was speaking about the big JLARC study on Virginia's K-12 funding formula. There has been a subcommittee, I think, as he mentioned this fall, looking at those recommendations from the commission. And Richmond did enter a public comment this fall around the JLARC study recommendations and what we would like to see happen next. So I just dropped a link in the chat to that if you would like to read that on your own. But I wanted to talk with you all a little bit about school construction today. This is one of the major legislative advocacy priorities that we have at Richmond Public Schools. This is an issue that does affect school divisions across the state. We know that based on an inventory that was done just a couple of years ago, that more than half of all school buildings in Virginia are now older than 50 years. And to replace those schools, it would cost about $25 billion. It is a very, very big price tag. And not that every single one of those buildings needs to be replaced, but we do know that older school buildings do need significant investment and ongoing investment in modernization and maintenance. And within Richmond, we would note that the average age of our school buildings are 61 years old. 36 of those, about 3/4 of our schools, are more than 50 years old, including 15 of them that are over 95 years old. And in the last 50 years, we have only built 14 new school buildings within the city of Richmond. So that's kind of our current inventory. RPS just conducted a facility condition assessment across all of the buildings within our division. The firm that did that has identified $43.7 million that we need to address immediate repairs over about the next 18 months. RPS, unfortunately, we can't levy taxes independently. Our neighbors, Henrico and Chesterfield, have a little bit more ability to raise some funds, but Richmond does rely totally on what the city and the state can provide. And while we had some really, really amazing wins back in 2020 and 2022 with big investments in school construction, there was a $1.2 billion investment in 2022. There's been very little investment since then. And so we are hoping that the General Assembly will continue to invest funding to support localities with this very, very high cost of keeping our school buildings up to date and modern learning environments for our students. We got great news yesterday. That was that Governor Youngkin has said that he is going to put a budget amendment for $290 million into the forthcoming amendments to the state budget. So we're very excited about that. But we do note that, you know, these needs, that $25 billion cost statewide, that's increasing by about $1 billion a year because of the increase in construction costs. And so we're really hoping that the General Assembly can do more to help fund kind of the backlog of construction and modernization projects across the state. It was recently reported the state will have about a $3.2 billion surplus. So there is funding available to support even greater investments in school construction as we move forward. So that was the big piece about school construction. That's going to be a major piece of our legislative agenda this coming year, talking a lot about ensuring that all students have modern and safe learning environments. And with that, I think we are going to transition over to our next topic, which Ken, it's over to you.
Real quick, Matthew, before we make that transition, there was a question about how much RPS spends per square foot on upkeep. If you have any insight on that.
I do not at this time, unfortunately, but I can take that note and follow up.
All right. Well, as we were preparing for this discussion, the topic of mental health came up as something that has been prominent in recent legislative sessions. And I think that mental health and other wraparound services are becoming more of a priority for lawmakers. I think the response and recovery from COVID has magnified this issue, and there's been a lot of research and analysis on over the past few years, now that there is a adequate sample size for related data. So you could see this emphasis of wraparound services, including mental health, during last year's session. And not all of the legislation was school related, but there were a few. HB 603 added additional relevant topics to required physical and health education instruction. Another bill directed the VDOE to create a model MOU for school divisions to partner with organizations that can provide virtual mental health resources. And I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. HB 224 would have required full-time staff in public schools to complete updated mental health awareness training. This bill was vetoed by the governor after his recommendations were rejected. The claim was that there was training that was already required, that this would essentially kind of duplicate training, and there was some disagreement over what was considered high risk. But you'll probably see something like that come up again this year. And then HB 168 required the Department of Education to develop a resource document on supports and services for unhoused students. And then a Senate Bill 283, which originally was intended to provide universal free lunch, was amended to have the VDOE, to have a VDOE study group estimate what the statewide cost impact was. So these are just a few samples of what we saw last year that were, again, these were directly related to schools, and there was other legislation that related to mental health that wasn't school related. I mentioned about the virtual telehealth services. I wanted to mention something that we're doing in Henrico schools this year, which I think you'll begin to see more of. So you might wonder, what does mental telehealth resources or virtual mental health look like? And in HCPS, our commitment to safety extends to student, family, and employee wellness. And as a part of an initiative called Henrico Cares, that we partnered with the county this past year, HCPS continues to expand its school-based mental health teams and resources, and is developing new partnerships with public and private mental health providers. So you may have actually seen on the TV news a couple weeks ago, all three of the major TV stations did this story, which featured these resources that, if you can go to the next slide there, that show these items on the screen that you see. So the first that we've partnered with, and there are two providers that these expand and simplify access to mental health services to students, staff, and families, and they're available at no cost. So the first is Care Solace on the left, which offers care coordination services to quickly connect students, families, and staff to the right mental health care and or substance abuse treatment options, regardless of insurance. And again, this is no cost. They offer live multilingual team members who are available 24/7, 365 days a year. This is also known as a care concierge service to help navigate the hardest part of seeking mental health, which is finding an appropriate provider and making an appointment that isn't like 6 weeks out. So what we discovered is in the mental health world, and for anybody who's had to navigate this, trying to find the right provider to meet a particular need that you may have or a family has is challenging. And then once you find that, trying to arrange for a timely appointment is kind of, more than half the battle. So this product or this service that we have, Care Solace, really helps do that by putting you in touch with those resources. And all these resources are also available through the counselors at the individual schools. And I think I saw a question. The privacy is protected in virtual mental health. The parents are involved in this. If the child is under 18 years old, if they're 18, they have the option of they're an adult, so it's their choice. But parents are always notified. But other than that, their privacy is absolutely protected. And on the other side of the screen there is another service that we're providing. It's called Hazel Health, and this is a new virtual mental health teletherapy service that's available to our Henrico students that are in grades 9 through 12. So the other one is available to everybody, including staff and families. But the Hazel Health is for students in grades 9 through 12. 9 through 12. So their therapy is available, and it is via confidential video sessions from home, and is again available to them at no cost in multiple languages. And students and families can learn more about this. We've publicized this well throughout our school division. And we've had hundreds of people, of students participating, and also for the other one, not only students, but staff as well. And again, these services can also be accessed through our school-based mental health service providers. So if we can go to the next slide, this year, our legislative priorities. Here's a couple of excerpts to show you that we do still have some mental health related priorities. And I think you can expect more bills related to mental health and wellness, again, not just in relation to schools. I won't read you what are the two top bullets, but that's an excerpt from our legislative priorities that were just recently adopted. So that's just a sample of some of the things we'll be advocating for during this legislative session. And you may have seen that just today, the governor proposed budget amendments in the amount of $70 million to support behavioral health. In Henrico County, earlier this year, we received more than $10 million to help build a large-scale crisis response center and detox and treatment facility. Again, that's a county building, not a school division building. And I put in there as the last bullet that while not mental health related per se, I did want to take this opportunity to mention that there is a bill that we will have sponsored in the House and Senate to make the extended 180-day limit for long-term substitute teachers permanent. This is set to expire at the end of the 24-25, this current school year. We successfully got an extension from 90 to 180 days 2 years ago, but it had a sunset clause related to that. So now we're trying to make that permanent. So I mentioned this because there was an indication about what are some things we can advocate for. So I invite you to look for these two bills that will be sponsored by Delegate McQuinn and Senator Aird. And the last thing I wanted to mention just was my contact information there. If anybody wants to contact me, I'm available and will respond to you. If you're interested in learning more about our legislative agenda, it's on our main website. And in terms of how you can just generally advocate for education legislation, I would encourage you to attend the House and Senate Education committees, either in person or you can do it online. You can testify in these subcommittees online. The schedule is pretty regular. They have at the main education committee meets on Monday and Wednesday mornings for the House at 8 o'clock in the morning. The K-12 subcommittee for the House meets at 7:30 on Tuesdays, and the Senate Education and Health Committee meets Thursday at 8:30 a.m. and their Public Education Subcommittee meets Thursday afternoon, a half hour after the adjournment of the Senate. So you can also find out who's on these committees and email them, call them, stop by to see them at the General Assembly building. But definitely look up on the Virginia General Assembly.gov website. You can see these resources, all the committee meetings, the agendas, so you can stay in touch with what's happening there. So I'm sorry, I think I probably went a little over my time. So I will. We're going to talk a little bit more about advocacy, and I'll turn it back over to Matthew.
Yeah, no, that was great, Ken. I was just pulling up the General Assembly website to start showing folks some of the items that you were mentioning. If you do hop over to the Virginia General Assembly website, we want to tell you about one really important tool, but that tool and some other really important links are found by clicking this little drop-down menu at the top. It's kind of a wonky interface, but it does the job. Ken was sharing a little bit about the committee meeting schedule. So if you will look under today's events, you'll see the link for the full LAS schedule. During session, these will get very long every day during session, and you will see the House Education Committee and the meeting details and a link to the agenda and the bills that they're going to consider that day. Also, you have the links to the video streaming for both the House of the Delegates and the Senate. You can go back and watch old committee meetings as well. They're posted a day after they happen. Over here, we have the listings for the House members and the Senate members. So as Ken was sharing, you can look up individuals and see, what committees they serve on. You can also sort and go to a committee list. So if we actually, let's jump back over. Here's our committee list. So you can select a committee and we can look at the House Education Committee. And we can see all the members that are on that committee with very easy ways to pull their email addresses and contact them. The other really, really important thing on this website is the Who's My Legislator tool. Every single person should know exactly who represents you within the General Assembly. Every single person is represented by one delegate and one senator. So if I drop in an address here, it should tell me exactly who my legislators are. So as you can see, I just entered in the address for City Hall, and I can see that our state delegate is Delegate Betsy Carr, and our state senator is Lamont Bagby. And then it has their emails and links to more information. You can also take a look at the boundaries of your district. So if you don't yet know who your legislator is, please use this tool tonight to find out who they are. And I really encourage you to send them an email to let them know that you're a constituent of theirs and that you prioritize public education, and you hope that they will do the best job they can to fund public schools in the General Assembly session. So we wanted to show you all a couple of those tools, especially that Who's My Legislator tool. We also wanted to share with you all some other really, really great resources that are available to you and both other folks that will be very active during the advocacy season.
Hey, Matthew.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I don't mean, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Before we get too far away, I neglected to see that there were a few questions that came up in response to some of the things I presented. So I'm happy to answer those now, or if I can do that, and then we can jump back to the.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, great. The first one says, what's the best way for us to get information for each district about bills that our school district supports? I would say that I know for Henrico County Public Schools, I mentioned that we have a page that lists our legislative priorities. So those don't specifically mention bills, but it does give you an idea of the types of things that we are supporting or opposing, as the case may be. And I think that the there's probably something similar on the other school division websites. But I think if you monitor the committee meetings themselves, I think you'll be able to see which bills are being supported by the individual school districts, school divisions, or advocacy groups. Or again, if you want to just, if you wanted to contact me directly, I'm happy to also share that information. So that I don't know if anybody, if Matthew or Sean wants to chime in on that question as well, and then I'll get back to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Richmond, we will publish a legislative agenda and regular legislative updates during session. Our first school board meeting of the year in January is usually when we present our legislative priorities and receive approval from our Richmond City School Board to advocate for those during session. So if you stand on the lookout for our January school board meeting, that will be kind of the first shot out of the gate when we will be talking about what our big legislative priorities are. And then we will be continuing to do legislative updates during session. I do have a page on the RPS website where we will be reactivating as session starts with updates on a weekly basis. And I am dropping a link to that into the chat right now. And I think I also even have a email sign up list on that page. Nope, I don't see the email sign up list, but I will be getting an email sign up form onto that page as well. We'll do email updates as well to anybody that signs up for that during session. Sean, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think for us, kind of similar to everybody else, a lot of our updates we give to our board in January and February through our board meetings. Our board typically meets almost every Tuesday in January and February to deal with budget issues. So I'm constantly giving them an update there, and then giving us clearly some daily updates on legislation as well.
And we've also looked at and may implement this year an email sign up like Matthew was mentioning, because I do a report for our a weekly report for our school board that lists all the bills, and I could easily post that to our website or email it to people who are interested in that. So that's something that I'm going to try to move forward with. The Carol asked if why is it needed to hire a long-term sub for a school year? Is that a way around the need for certified teachers, or is it to allow continuity for a classroom where a teacher is taking leave of absence or family leave or some such? That's a great question, and it is the latter. It's we are wanting that we're not looking for ways around hiring teachers. In fact, we have a program where we try to recruit our long-term subs to become full-time certified teachers. As you know, I think everybody knows there's a real teacher shortage. There's just not as many people going into the teaching profession through the universities. And there's been a lot of legislation that has eased the path of provisionally licensed teachers and career switchers. So what happens is we have a need to fill a long-term class with a long-term sub for somebody who goes out on medical leave or a maternity leave or what have you. And of course, we'd prefer to have a full-time certified teacher in there. And in some cases, long-term subs are certified teachers. But the requirements for long-term subs are oftentimes, depending upon the district, more stringent than your daily subs. But what can happen, and we have over 100 long-term substitute teachers that this affects, is that if they're in a classroom and they reach a 90-day, they may have a great rapport with the students. They might, there's that continuity of having them in the classroom, and they reach the 90th day. We then have to they remove them from the class because they've reached the limit. And at that point, finding another long-term sub to fill that class is extremely difficult. So our chief of HR and has contacted others and gotten some great information as to why this is really needed. It affects probably in larger school divisions more than 100 teachers. We try to actively recruit these long-term subs to become full-time certified teachers. So I hope that answers your question. The other question, has the meals tax enabled Henrico to afford these mental health services? I believe our meals tax is dedicated to capital improvements. I'm not completely sure on that, but I think those, I'm not sure if those funds are restricted or not. I believe that they are. However, we are grateful for that revenue, and we also have a very good relationship with our Board of Supervisors. They have been extremely generous and partnering with us in the needs that we have in many areas, including mental health. And again, I mentioned earlier that there's a countywide program called Henrico Cares, and these mental health programs are under the umbrella of that broader Henrico Cares program. So thank you for the opportunity to answer those questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Well, we had a slide prepared for you all as well tonight, talking a little bit about the other advocacy resources and all of the wonderful advocacy partners that are down at the General Assembly as well during session. Ken and Sean and I are just but 3 of hundreds of registered lobbyists that are down representing interests from across the Commonwealth. A lot of our colleagues do one thing at the beginning of every single day, and that is reading the news. So there's a wonderful, wonderful resource called VA News. It is provided by the Virginia Public Access Project, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that compiles information, especially on money in politics, around campaign finance, lobbyists, et cetera. But one of the really wonderful things that they do is every single day they send out an email called VA News that has the top headlines from across the state of Virginia. So this is all local and Virginia related news covering the executive branch and the legislative branch of state government, as well as what's happening within all of our localities with our city councils and our boards of supervisors. So I really encourage you, if you want to stay totally on top of what's happening in the General Assembly, subscribe to this email news list, and you'll get an email every morning that really gives you the lay of the land. So I highly encourage VPAP as one of my #1 go-to resources during session. We also listed a number of other organizations here. Fund Our Schools is a coalition of organizations that is advocating for fully funding our public K-12 education system in the state. RPS very much supports the work that they're doing, and they're really doing an awesome job at coordinating amongst all the different education advocacy groups, trying to advocate for the best education funding package possible. We, of course, have the Virginia Education Association and the Virginia PTA. They are wonderful resources as well. They also coordinate on Big Lobby Day. Usually that happens in February on President's Day. The Commonwealth Institute is an organization that Richmond follows a lot. They do wonderful research and policy about the state budget. And one of the things that they do is during the General Assembly session, as the money committees, the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee prepare their budgets, the Commonwealth Institute does a side-by-side. So we can actually look at one document that has what did the governor propose, what did the House propose, what did the Senate propose, and then they'll keep updating that as the budget goes through the budget process. So I really encourage you to get updates from the Commonwealth Institute. Really insightful, good research about education funding and policy. A handful of other resources for you, including the Virginia School Boards Association and the Virginia Association of School Superintendents. Our three localities are members of both of those organizations. So we're paying very close attention to what they're advocating for, and we're also supporting that work. They're often advocating for things that very much align with what we need at the division level. And then this year, we expect special education to be a topic that is going to be discussed a lot. The governor, I think, recently announced some investment in special education. And the Virginia Council of Administrators of Special Education is one of the big advocacy groups. I know at Monday's meeting of the joint subcommittee studying education funding, Mike Asap, the executive director of the Virginia Council of Administrators of Special Education, gave a great public comment to them about the need for better investment for our special education students. So they're a great resource. And then, Ken, did you want to talk a little bit more about LIS and Lobbyists in a Box?
Sure. I don't know if how many of you are familiar with Lobbyists in a Box. And the LIS website. And by the way, the LIS website is one of the main links off the Virginia General Assembly website. So if you were to start with virginiageneralassembly.gov, you can find a link over in the right-hand corner of the screen for that. And it is such a great resource to look up all of the bills. You can search by session. You see in the upper left-hand corner that it says, the little drop down says 2025 regular session. You can change to different sessions. And if you do change that, they've upgraded the website, so it'll actually default back to their older version. Which looks like this, and it basically functions the same way. There's some good improvements with the newer version for this year. But as you see along the top, you can search for bills by subject, by bill number, who it was introduced by, and if you sign up for the Lobbyist in a Box, there's a kind of a free version that you can sign up for, and it allows you to track 5 bills. If you want to do more than 5, then you have to pay a subscription. But what this does is you create a bill list, and if there's a few that you're wanting to track, you add them to your profile. And whenever anything happens with that bill, when it gets put on an agenda, when it's voted on, when it's amended, anything at all, it will send you an email to tell you. And you can set up the email to send it to you immediately or in a daily summary. So there's lots of great choices. So again, you don't have to pay anything just to look up bills if you're doing it on your own. But if you wanted to track more than 5 bills, you'd have to pay a subscription. But I'd encourage you to go in there and try it, and particularly if there's things that you're really interested in and really following. It's such a great resource. Let me see here. If we go back to the Virginia General Assembly website, if you can go there, and there's another very helpful item that I use daily, and it's on the left-hand column. It's down near the bottom. It says meeting schedules, and the Legislative Information System meeting schedule. That one gives you a daily list of all the meetings that are being held, what time they're being held, where they're being held, and if there is an online link to the meeting where you can watch or participate, it will have that there. And they, has the agenda for these meetings. So that is a super useful resource They have, as you can see, there's meetings going on all the time, even outside of the legislative session. But when the legislative session starts, that the all the meetings are posted there, and it's updated very often. So you might want to refresh your browser if you're looking at it, because sometimes meetings get canceled, like at the last minute. So I think there's a lot that you can do for your advocacy efforts without ever leaving your home. Again, you can participate remotely in committee meetings. The General Assembly's online process, their video streaming process is very good. They always go to the committee chairs always go to the online comments first before the in-person comments, so you won't be you won't have to wait a long time if you want to provide a comment. So there's really a lot you can do even without ever leaving your home. But I think, of course, the most effective lobbying and advocacy is done if you can be there in person. I would also encourage you to do that. Despite what you might think, legislators are very responsive to their constituents, and kind of grassroots advocacy. They're very favorable towards that.
And Ken, while you were talking about the schedule, one thing that I pulled up that I thought would be good to flag to everybody is that what lobbyists call the unofficial start of session is when the governor introduces his proposed amendments or his proposed new budget and presents that to the money committees, that House Appropriations Committee and that Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee I discussed. So that is coming up very, very soon. Next Wednesday, December 18th at 9:30 a.m. You will see on the schedule joint meeting of Senate Finance and Appropriations, House Appropriations, and House Finance committees. The governor will present to all three of those committees at the same time, and this year will be presenting his proposed amendments to the state budget. It's a great opportunity to come in person. There will be a very, very full room today. We have a lot of legislators that will be in the building for that meeting, or a great opportunity to view that meeting online as well. But that is kind of the day that really kicks things off once we know what the governor is going to propose in the budget. So coming up soon. Okay, Sean, did you want to add anything else? And then I think we were going to jump into questions if Sam wants to get ready to moderate.
No, I'll say something maybe at the end. So,
okay. Well, Sam, that was the presentations that the three of us had prepared. We are happy to take questions from folks or from yourself.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's been very illuminating. There was one question that Matthew you addressed by chatting, but also I think it's worth like verbally responding, maybe from all three of you. Is about Lobby Day and maybe just stepping back and explaining what a Lobby Day is and who can participate in a Lobby Day and the effectiveness maybe of a Lobby Day. If all three of you maybe could speak a little bit to that.
Sure, I'll jump in to start. So a lobby day is when you get as many people to come down in person to the General Assembly as possible to meet with legislators, to attend committee meetings, to wear a coordinated T-shirt, to have coordinated talking points so that everybody is carrying the same message and meeting with as many legislators as possible. Sometimes for a lobby day, there's other activities planned as well. Sometimes there's a big rally that might happen on Capitol Square. Sometimes there might be a legislative breakfast or a legislative briefing that happens during a lunch period. Sometimes in those lobby days, you'll also get a chance to go and observe part of a floor session of the House or of the Senate. So it's really an opportunity to come and have that hands-on experience of meeting with legislators, talking about what your legislative priorities are, and trying to get as many legislators as possible to take notice of that. So it's a really, really powerful tool in our advocacy toolbox when it comes to trying to get the word out about a legislative advocacy priority. Richmond Public Schools is going to be doing a lobby day on January 27th this year. We will get out a registration form for that so that folks can sign up and let us know if you're planning to come down. We're hoping to have a legislative briefing in the morning, do legislative visits all morning, and then have a lunch and the opportunity to visit the floor sessions. The Fund Our Schools organization, Virginia Education Association, Virginia PTA, they also often host their own lobby days. There's usually one really, really big education lobby day every session. I think that is happening on President's Day, but I don't have confirmation on that as of today. Ken, Sean, I don't know if you guys have heard anything else. But that does often happen on President's Day. And the best place to find out for when that's going to happen is sign up for the Fund Our Schools emails, and you will get an email as soon as they've confirmed that date. So those are the current lobby days, but I will kind of add that there is never a bad day to visit the General Assembly. The more days of session that we can have folks down there talking about public education funding and talking about these legislative priorities, the better. Advocacy is never confined to just one day. It is an ongoing need. So if you can't make it on those days, if you can make it on those days, come down to the General Assembly another day. I know Ken, Sean, and myself, we are down there almost every single day. We are happy to answer any questions that you have about traveling to the General Assembly building, what to do when you get there. If you need assistance with talking points, we can get you copies of our legislative agenda and our legislative priorities. So please reach out if you want to come down and have any questions about doing so. Sean, Ken, you guys want to say anything further?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is I think Lobby Day is a very impactful piece, and I think that it's really helpful just as a chance to kind of get a big group together, maybe carpooling in those pieces. So I think that's a good presence to have, especially for folks that haven't had the chance to be down at the General Assembly, just to kind of experience and take that experience in. I would say this too, though. A lot of times, the concept really people work with is I want to go downtown to the General Assembly and I want to get a meeting with my senator or delegate. And I'll tell you, it's really hard to manage that for them. So what I mean by that is simply a lot of times, especially for us in our jobs and for you as well, the best chance to catch a legislator a lot of times is going to a committee meeting, catching them before the meeting, catching them after the meeting. Honestly, a lot of times I catch legislators in the hallway because all due respect, they're not surrounded by their staff. I can have one-on-one conversations, interact that way, and I find it to be much more impactful. You can spend a lot of time trying to schedule a meeting, and that's kind of difficult. The last piece I'll say is this, and I realize we're now in December, but a lot of times for legislators, by the time they get down to the General Assembly, they're set with their legislative programs. They know what they want to do. They know their localities, perspectives. So anytime that you have between now and the start of session to have an interaction will be even more impactful. So don't take that for granted and just wait until January comes around.
I'll just add that I think that again, there's been a lot said about the lobbying days, and that's great to show your support. I think the more specific that you can be in your lobbying efforts, the better. I think when you see somebody holding a sign that says "Fund Our Schools," that's not really very specific. I think you need to kind of drill down and what is it exactly that you're wanting to fund? What legislation could impact that? So be specific and purposeful. The other thing I would say is that when you see kind of how the sausage is made, as the saying goes, everything happens in committees. By the time something gets to the floor of the House or Senate, it's pretty much a done deal. So the time to affect legislation is when it's first introduced in the committee meetings and the subcommittees. Because a lot of times the public participation is limited in the full committees, and it's really the subcommittees where the legislators take comment. So I think that's where people can be most effective, is by identifying specific bills and then participating in the testimony, the public participation process, kind of like at school board meetings, at the subcommittee meetings, and that's where you have your greatest chance of affecting legislation.
Thank you all for that. There's one additional question in the Q&A about equity in education. That's a big focus of the League of Women Voters. And I know that all of your districts are thinking about equity in some kind of way. So if you could speak a little bit to how most effectively we can achieve equity in education and advocate for that during the upcoming session.
I'll start because there was something I said just a minute ago that I want to reiterate. When you advocate, when somebody says, "Oh, we're advocating for equity in education," I think that means different things to different people, and everybody wants equity and fairness and so on. So, I think that I think you need to start by being more specific. How can you advocate for equity in education? What exactly is it that you mean? And I think you again have to drill down to there's very few pieces of legislation that are just like affect everything broadly based. So you have to kind of find the bills that would have some kind of impact on some sort of equity, whether it's funding equity, instructional equity, special education equity. So I think it's just being more specific and identifying what you mean by that. That would be my answer.
Yeah, I would echo what Ken said. I think that I think everybody on this call in this meeting, our heart's in the right place too. I think when it comes to General Assembly, it's being specific. It's being able to say, the at-risk funding that you're putting in there impacts X amount of students in our school division. We need that to be increased by X amount. And to be able to show kind of what you would do, how you would invest that money. That really is kind of how they discuss it down the General Assembly. They all have the best of intentions. We hear from them after the session how much additional money they put in education. So I think one of our tasks is really to define how we like for them respectfully to invest in education. So I think the more that we can refine that, whether it's anything from school construction, having the best facilities for our children to learn in, whether it's access to meals, the other needs that our families have. I mean, we know in our school division, we have more kids living in poverty, respectfully, than the city of Richmond has students. And a lot of times people look at Chesterfield and think there's additional means to address those pieces, but our families have real needs. So I think the equity piece for me really begins before they even enter into our classrooms. And so kind of really helping to reframe that conversation is important.
Great. Thank you, guys. There's also a question, a more specific question. I know we're getting close to time here too, but a question about eliminating the cap when it comes to school funding. There is a question whether it is going to allow more wealthy districts to spend more money while poor districts get left behind. Would any of you guys be able to kind of clarify that?
Sure. Eliminating the support staff cap is a win for divisions across the entire Commonwealth. For folks that don't know what we're referring to, the support staff cap was a policy decision that was made by the General Assembly. I think it was in 2009, 15 years ago, as coming off of the Great Recession, or in response to the Great Recession and the impact on the state budget. The General Assembly decided that they were going to cap the number of support staff positions to instructional positions. So, for example, they said that you can only hire one support staff for every 4 instructional positions. I don't think it was exactly that, but it was close. Many school divisions were already employing more support staff than that cap allowed. So what happened in effect was that the school divisions all had to make a choice. We can either continue to employ all of these support staff cap and just pay their entire salary instead of getting the state funding for those salaries, or they can lay off support staff. You can guess that most school divisions try to keep as many of those support staff as possible and just had to eat that cost locally. So over the past couple of years, the General Assembly has started to remove that support staff cap, but as time went on, the cost of removing that continued to grow, so they weren't able to do it all at once. That subcommittee, that joint subcommittee that has been studying education funding this year, that's kind of their number one recommendation going into the new General Assembly session, is that that support staff cap is fully and finally eliminated. But that will not leave behind anyone. That helps all school divisions.
I would add that it actually does the opposite. The support cap um, affects poorer districts more because wealthier districts can use local funds, as Matthew said, um, to pay for those additional support cap. And the law didn't prohibit you from hiring them; it restricted the funding of them. So what what happened is that localities started picking up that cost, and so um, the if it's reinstated, localities that are not as wealthy and can't supplant that money with local funds, they'll be able to hire more support staff.
Great. Well, we're pretty close to being here for an hour, so I want to be respectful of everyone's evening. But Matthew, Ken, Sean, do you guys have any final words that you'd like to leave with folks on how to mentally prepare and prep oneself for the coming legislative session and advocating for public education?
Yeah, and Sam, I'll jump in and I'll also address that one other question that was in the chat. A person entered a question that was just kind of expressing the challenge of the General Assembly schedule. And is it really reasonable for us to expect a bunch of public school parents from across the state to come down to the General Assembly in the middle of the winter for a 7:30 a.m. subcommittee meeting? And the answer is that no, we don't expect a huge number of people to be there for 7:30 a.m. subcommittee meetings. But there are a number of ways that folks can advocate, whether you are in Richmond or whether you are in Tazewell, Virginia. You can get onto your computer and you can send emails to your legislators. That is probably one of the most important things that you can do as an advocate. You can watch those committee meetings, those floor sessions. You can submit public comment electronically. So no, you do not have to be there in person. As Ken said, it makes a big impact when you do come in person, especially those legislators that know that if you are traveling from outside of Richmond, they really recognize and appreciate that you took that much time and energy and your own effort to come down to the Capitol. So there is a lot to be said for coming in person, but that is not the only way to advocate. Please do whatever works for you to advocate. I just think that the number one non-negotiable that anyone can do, no matter where you are, is sending emails to your legislators, especially those two legislators that represent you as their constituent. You are the one who is dictating their agenda and what they care about. So if a legislator is receiving 100 emails about a topic, you know that they are going to be talking to their colleagues and advocating to get that thing done. So do not underestimate the power of just sending that simple email to your legislators. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
Yeah, I think just to echo that, I think the ability to kind of personalize and be specific with legislators is critically important. I think, they hear from us all the time downtown. And so often I'll advocate for something and a couple of days later they'll come up and say, hey, I talked to a teacher and the teacher told me X, Y, and Z. And I'll kind of smile and they'll look at me. I said, yeah, I told you that 3 days ago. But like they heard it from a teacher and it's like, now it makes sense. But that personalization, I think, really is impactful. And quite frankly, if you're a constituent, you're a voter, let's be honest, that's the way the process works. So I think your ability to advocate and kind of personalize, be specific, really goes a long way.
I would also echo those comments. I would disagree a little bit with the presupposition of the question, which says, given how the GA schedule is inaccessible to most Virginians, I would say it's more accessible now than it ever has been. And I believe that, as has been stated, that legislators are very responsive to their constituents. They're used to seeing us lobbyists, and it's easy for them to kind of take what we say with a grain of salt. Not that they don't respect what we say, but they hear from us all the time. So when they hear from their constituents or parents, they do. I think they're pretty good at being responsive to that. And I think that what it kind of boils down to is, as citizens and as voters, and it's incumbent upon us. The way democracy works is by the people, and it's incumbent upon us to be participants in the process. We all have busy lives, and I get it. We all got things to do, and we've got meetings and so on. But I think if it's something that's really important to you, then it's necessary to make time to be part of the process. And again, I would say it's easier now than it ever has been. It doesn't mean that it's just easy, but it is easier now. So I would just encourage everybody. There are ways to be effective in advocating, and just take advantage of those.
Great. Well, again, Sean, Ken, and Matthew, we really appreciate your time and your expertise, and all you do to advocate for public education in the Commonwealth. And as representative of the League of Women Voters, I can't echo what you've said enough. We're all about engaging and being a part of the democratic process, and that means engaging with your legislators, being a part of the General Assembly session, and making your voice heard. So I think what all of you have said have really reinforced that all of our individual voices do matter, and especially when we can come together and make our voices louder by increasing our numbers. I think we can actually make a difference. So I just want to thank you all again for everything that you've shared. And I'm sure that those who are tuning in tonight, league members and parents and teachers, across the area, will be in touch with you and their legislators as this session kicks off. So thank you again for your expertise. Thank you again to all of our participants who have taken the time to listen in tonight, especially all of our local school board members and local reporters. We really appreciate you all tuning in and getting this information as well. I'm sure you'll also be hearing from your local constituents as the year gets going. All right. Well, with that, if there's anything else, I think it's been a great evening, and we'll let everybody enjoy their dinners.
Thank you so much for hosting tonight, Sam, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for getting this coordinated. We appreciate y'all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Have a great night.